Joyce Smith is an Executive Assistant District Attorney for the Community Relations Division of Nassau County, New York, which is Long Island's right outside of New York City. And Joyce has done amazing work with regard to staying in touch with her community despite the pandemic. So Joyce is going to speak. Marissa is going to be the timekeeper. So Joyce, she's going to give you a 5-minute warning and a 1-minute warning. And then we'll go on to the next presentation. So Joyce, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to share a couple of points about community engagement during the pandemic, which is, as you can imagine, as challenging as everything else that we've been dealing with during this season. But it's a season of change and a time for us to adapt and grow and move outside of our comfort zone. So I'm going to share a couple of points with you that we've started in Nassau County, and I hope that it starts a dialogue or some thoughts within your own offices. Just a quick note, the division that I run is the house for 5 different program offices. We include the Office of Immigrant Affairs, our Community Affairs Office, which used to be an individual person, Renee Fisher, who was responsible for all community outreach in our office. We've now expanded into the division. So included in that 5 program office roster is Community Affairs, our Community Partnership Program, which is based in Hempstead. And that's one of the areas here in Nassau that experiences a disproportionate level of crime and gang activity and gun violence. So we planted an outreach post or an outreach center there in the middle of Hempstead, and we operate that 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We also have our core services, which includes victim services as well as school-based programming. And our recruitment department is within our community relations division, because we recognize that recruiting new ADAs into our office requires that we start young and we spread the message early and often throughout their education all the way through law school. So one of the other things that all of the directors in my division participate in one aspect or another is our advisory councils. And Chris and I and others have talked about this in other forms, but the idea of an advisory council is just to make sure that we have a regular continuing dialogue with members of the community so that they understand we're available to hear from them on a monthly basis, and they're able to kind of get a backstage pass to our office and understand what we do as prosecutors, because we don't want their first engagement with us to be in the courtroom as a witness where they're unfamiliar with the process or our office. So these 5 program offices, as you can imagine, in January, had calendars that were jam-packed, like all of ours, right? Our schedules were full of meetings and conferences. We have been planning for years, for months, annual conferences with, several hundred people who were registered and scheduled to participate. We had monthly council meetings with our advisors. Our calendar was full and ready. And then March hit and the COVID crisis hit and canceled everything that we planned. Full stop. The district attorney sent us home, and then, it was a wise choice, right? DA Singas recognized we needed to put safety first, and everything that we thought was important to us in terms of outreach and, being connected with people in person had to stop for the sake of our collective safety. So we went home. We picked up our laptops, and like many of you, we all started working remotely and trying to figure out, well, we want to stay safe, but in the community relations realm, how do you stay connected with people when you're ordered to stay away from them, right? And we recognized that this was going to create a huge challenge. And for some of us, it caused panic to set in, and we didn't know how we would be able to maintain the level of either FaceTime or just connectedness that we enjoy as the outreach arm of the DA's office. So the first thing that I want to point out is, in order to understand how to connect with your community during a pandemic, you have to understand as a foundation point how you connect with your community. Because if we're not currently or prior to COVID engaging with our community, then trying to ramp it up during a pandemic is going to be a challenge that we may not be ready for. So if you're going to engage with your community as a district attorney's office, or really as any organization, I encourage you to remember the word engage. And that means educate yourself about who the people are in your neighborhood, right? Understand your culture and the issues that surround that neighborhood. Navigate the issues, that is, look for them before they hit, before the iceberg hits. We have to know it's out there. So we have to prepare for the crisis. We have to prepare for the social justice movement calling for criminal justice reform. We have to prepare for the issues that will cause press releases to go out at the 11th hour. But if we're connected with community members, more often than not, we're on the front lines and can hear about and prepare our offices for these issues before they become a crisis. We need to generate interest in our work. So many community members don't know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. They don't understand what happens when, as it did in our state in 2020, and many of you have experienced, when criminal justice reform trickles out from our legislators' offices and into our files and into our discovery practices and our protocols, we have to respond. We have to be ready to respond, but the community doesn't know or appreciate what that call for change does on a practical level. So we had to change everything with the criminal justice reform package that was passed here in New York. And that required us educating the community about how that affected our work and their lives. So generating interest in the work of the DA's office is part and parcel of everything that we do every day as community relations division members. But we also have to stay motivated. We had to stay active. We have to stay involved. We have to be the cruise directors, right? We have to make sure that we're excited about the work we're doing so that we can excite others and interest others within and outside of our offices in being prosecutors and being effective public servants. We needed to graduate and kind of grow up. We have to always look to the next level. What's the next level of the issue? What's the next level of the technique? What's the next strategy that we have to employ? We have to always look forward, because keeping our eyes on a gradual expansion of our programming is the way that we stay relevant. And then finally, we have to always expect the great. We have to always aim for a successful encounter. I don't engage, and none of my team members engage in any event or plan for any event expecting it to fail. We don't expect to have a handful of people show up when we go out to do an outreach event. We expect to have people to turn away. And that's the goal, right? And setting the bar higher and higher each time that we engage with the public requires that we first challenge ourselves and make sure that we're expecting the best out of that endeavor. So the question is, how do we adapt this model to the pandemic and to the realities of COVID? The first thing, we absolutely have to educate ourselves. And we did. We started by educating ourselves about, well, how do we communicate differently? How do we do this now? The first thing we had to recognize is the tools that were available to us. Social media. Our kids and all of the young people around you know each one of these handles. They know what each one of these icons means. We have to know them as well. We have to know how to integrate Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and every other social media avenue into our daily operations as a community engagement arm. It's not just for a brand or marketing division of a Fortune 500 company. It's for us to do too. You know, often in government, we sit back and say, well, we're the government. We're always going to be here. We're the DA's office. You'll always need us. But we have a brand. We have a market. We have people that need to know what we do and how we do it to support us. Because when they come into our offices, either as victims or maybe as a cooperator or somebody that we want to serve in some capacity, we need to make sure that they know what we're doing and that we're sincere in our efforts. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we have a visible, constant social media presence. You need to use your websites, right? And make sure that they are incorporating some of the most advanced methods of the constant contact form, or having a regular tickler or calendar of events that's included. We also started using Zoom and every other media platform to our advantage so that we could use, so that we could use these mechanisms to teach people what we do. So we had a recent training with members of our county-wide victims advocacy working group. We educated them about the new extreme risk protection orders that our legislature passed, and that was the red flag law that allow for us to ask individual members of the public or family members or community members to raise the red flag if they see someone in possession of a weapon that may not need to have access to that because of some crisis or other traumatic experience. Obviously, our meetings all move to Zoom and to Teams and every other remote or virtual platform. These are critical to the lifeblood of every community relations division. Every time we host a meeting, we're touching, we're reaching, we're communicating. Every time we're not able to meet, we're missing out on an opportunity to communicate and learn about issues as they're developing. Some of the advisory councils that I mentioned that we host with the community actually wanted to move to more frequent meetings because they felt a sense of isolation from one another and separation. So we moved those meetings up to once per week. They ended up becoming more of a support group throughout the early days of COVID, so that these individuals, particularly our faith leaders, were leaning on one another for a better understanding of how they could engage with their populations that they served.
5-minute warning.
Thank you. Secondly, when you're navigating your community's greatest concern during COVID, the first thing you have to figure out is, where's the crisis? Where's the fire? We realized that most of the people in our community and in Nassau County wanted two things. They wanted information about COVID and they needed food. The areas where the food deserts were experiencing the greatest lack, we provided food drives during the holidays and in off seasons in places where they were not able to access county services. Our ADAs actually contributed to those food donations, and we distributed them through our community partnership program. Where we recognized that members of the population in our advisory groups, et cetera, were not getting information from the county, we brought in the Deputy County Executive for Health and Human Services. We brought in the head of health equity to explain how COVID and the testing and the other protocols that the county was rolling out would affect their communities. Next thing, I'm sorry for going a little fast, but this is available to you and we'll share it later. We generated and tried to reintroduce the community to our work. We realized the schools were not going to welcome us in to do more in-person presentations, and that created a huge panic in the minds of those of us who like going into the schools and talking with young kids about our careers and our choices. So we rolled out online presentations that are available on demand, on request from the schools who want to still hear from us and who need the same information for their students, but didn't know how to get access to it without us there. Now they can request this online presentation from us, and we make that available at any time the school requests. We also engage in a process of wellness checks. Our victim services advocates reached out, obviously, to all of the complainants and witnesses that they had been serving prior to the pandemic, but we also serve a population of mandated reentry clients who come to our community partnership program for support and services. So we reached out to them. How are you doing? Those outreach calls and wellness checks were pivotal. It reconnected the population with us. It increased the number of intakes that we had available to us. And we now made sure that the community knew we were still open for business to help them. We have to stay involved. Although COVID told us that we couldn't touch and access people in a close way anymore, we recognized that we still had to be present. We still had to be available. So we mentored our students at our elementary school, socially distant, right? 6 feet apart, but they saw us, they heard us, they knew we were still available to them. The individuals who would pass by our partnership program every day knew we're still open for business and we're available as a resource. 2020 forced us all to adapt. 2020 said to us, let me see if you can actually make it through this. And we did. We did. Our offices made it through. We changed the way and the attitude that we had to deal with our usual circumstances and situations. But now we have to graduate into 2021. And what's 2021 got ready for us? We don't know yet, but we're ready. And we know that whatever the challenge is, we've already been through a whole lot as a country and as a globe, so that we can look at 2021 with excitement and with expectation. And just wrapping up as a last point, you have to expect for great things to come out of a crisis. You have to expect that. So if, as a community relations arm of the offices that we serve in, we expect to reconnect with our communities, we're going to tell them, welcome back. We were still here. We are going to host outdoor events as soon as we're able to, as soon as the weather is warm and we're able to do so safely. We're going to respond to changing criminal justice. Okay, thank you. And we're going to respond to those trends with meaningful services. If there's an increase in DV in your county, we should know that because we've been navigating the issues. We see the iceberg coming. We know that those issues are going to require enhanced services. So we're ready to provide that. National Night Out is coming up in August. Hopefully we'll be able to have it again this year. And then lastly, consider trying something new. We're going to look at esports as a new after school endeavor to engage with the 16 to 24-year-old population that's particularly at risk for gang recruitment. We're going to use esports as an avenue for them to get into college, and we'll provide the laptops and the access for them to be able to just learn a new skill and be able to take remote learning to another level. If you're interested in learning about any of these programs or initiatives that we started during COVID, please reach out to me. Know that this is something that you can do. It's available at your fingertips, and you just have to light that spark of creativity in your mind so that we'll be able to work together for a common good. Thanks for the time, Chris.